Hello and welcome aboard Narrowboat Gentian on a very, very cold January day. It went down, I think, to about -4, -5 Celsius overnight. That must be about 25-ish Fahrenheit. I'm guessing there slightly. But anyway, cold enough for the canal to very, very slightly freeze over. It's not a thick layer of ice. As I move around in the boat is rocking and you can hear the ice cracking, so it's clearly not too thick. But there's a lovely frost over everything, and I did sleep aboard the boat last night. I had my little oil-filled 500-watt electric radiator just keeping the edge off the chill, and also the LPG heater which blows the hot air in. I set that to about 12 degrees Celsius or something, so it would just come on when it got really, really chilly. It's noisy, you see, you don't really want that blowing during the night, but I wrapped myself up in my duvet, which is a very good duvet, and I was perfectly toasty. Anyway, what was the point of all that? The point is to say I am aboard, and I'm setting my mind, I think, to DIY projects that I want to do on the boat in the coming month or months or whatever, and I thought I would outline the projects. I'm probably not going to actually do any today. It is too perishingly cold. Even just stepping outside for a moment has my hands all numb. So I thought rather than actually start them, I would list them and then perhaps solicit your advice on a couple of them. And I know you like offering advice, and there are some points where I really do need some suggestions as to what I should do. There's things to do inside the boat and outside. Should we start with outside, even though it is perishingly cold? Yes, let's do that. There's a couple of things I want to show you. First of all is solar, and I have here the 100-watt solar panel that was on my project boat Twiggy. It's not going to go back aboard Twiggy, and although it's only a little panel, I don't think I'm going to need any more than that here aboard Gentian. First of all, the boat is simply too small to take much solar, and with it being just a weekend and short break boat anyway, it doesn't need a lot of solar. It just needs something to trickle charge the battery when you go out for a weekend. I was originally thinking I'd have one big panel here, but having folded back the cratch board, and I like the fact that this folds back and stays out the way, I've now restricted myself to the space behind. If I push the boat pole back, then just this gap between the wooden bit and the end of the cratch cover will be where the panel can go. Why not further back? Well, obviously because of the hatch. Also, of course, the boat pole sits here, and it's just not going to be sensible unless I get rid of the boat pole entirely. Then I could put a panel here, but you do need a boat pole every now and again to push yourself off the mud, and it needs to live somewhere, and that's where it's going to live. But I can push it a little bit further back so that panel can go here. The only mild downside of pushing the pole back is that it then comes right here to the back alongside the hatch, but it doesn't obstruct the hatch, so I don't think that's going to be a problem and should leave me space to put the panel. I will pop the panel in situ without its mountings, because I haven't made them yet, and show you. Oh, this is slippery. Is that not, by pure luck, just the perfect size for that little spot? Just goes in there, and the pole goes there, and it just needs, I think, to be mounted onto the grab rail, but there is a gap here and on the other side, so I need to make the panel wider and then sit on top of that grab rail, and this is where I might be looking for some suggestions. You see, I have bought this strip of aluminium stuff. It's about 2-3 millimeters thick, and I figure I can cut that into 4s and then rivet it on. I happen to have a rivet gun. Rivet it into each of the corners of the panel, and then it will come out something like that, and then I just need a way of mounting it between the actual bit of aluminium and the rail, and that's what I'm not sure about. I could have it extend over the rail a bit and then put a U-shaped clamp of some sort underneath there and just bolt it on, but that means that this is then sticking out, which is a little bit unsightly, and I suppose I could grind off the corners a bit, make it a little nicer. But then the other thought is to have it, I don't know, 2 or 3 millimeters thick, 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 2 or either flush with the end of the rail thing, but then I'm not really sure how to attach it. I could just do one hole on that side and put cable ties round, but then anyone could snip the cable ties, I suppose. And then I could conceivably have it lining up with the middle of the rail, which is the tidiest solution. Then it's not sticking out at all. But again, how do I attach that to the rail? And all solutions need to be aluminium. I can't use anything with steel, because steel and aluminium will, as you know, different metals react and then start to corrode each other. So everything's got to be aluminium. Aluminium screws, aluminium brackets, whatever I do. But how best to have that attached to that in a secure fashion, but ideally as tidy a fashion as possible. The U bracket coming out here, all right, maybe not that far, but that far, is certainly the easiest, but that's not terribly pretty, is it? Bearing in mind, obviously, the panel will be above. This will be underneath the panel, and the panel will be sitting on top of that, and then there'll be one on each corner. One there, when you get the gist. I just can't get over how well that panel fits that spot. Pure fluke. It won't be going back on Twiggy, because Twiggy's not going to have solar. It's too odd a shape to have solar, which is why that panel ended up over the hatch. Well, I want Twiggy's hatch to open. So anyway, by the by, the point is that panel works perfectly there. 100 watts, 10 amps at full tilt in bright sunlight. Perfect for just trickle charging the battery here. The next question then obviously is the routing of the cables from the panel into the boat, and this also links into the next DIY project I want to do, so I will show you that now. You see, it's at the back end of the boat, down here where the electricals are. In that cupboard is the battery charger, the fuses, and it's the obvious place to put a solar charge controller, because then the wiring comes through here and the batteries are under that deck board. So that's where it needs to come to. So quite obviously the wire from the solar will come down here, probably just attach it to the side of the rail, and it'll come down here and then needs to go in. And you might think, how shall we get it in? We'll drill a hole. But hang on a minute. What is that? What is this? Because that looks like it's a thing that has a hole that goes through, but this seems to serve no purpose, and I cannot work out what it is. I've had suggestion from people on the Sea Otter group on Facebook that this may have been a TV aerial of some point, but quite how I don't know, because this is a little cap and these holes are filled up with some sort of gunge, and this is just a big plastic thing. I think I'm going to have to take this off. It's got 4 screws and I think some sealant, and then you'd imagine if that was a TV aerial there'd be a hole going through, and I could use that for the solar panel cables. And when you look at it from underneath, this is in that cabinet at the back of the boat, you can see a hole there that clearly had a wire of some sort coming through it, and then there are further holes there which look like that from the other side, and I do wonder whether there used to be a small TV set mounted on that bulkhead. It's a funny place to watch TV, because that is where the dinette is. So you'd kind of be sitting here looking up at the TV or watching it from a very great distance away in the saloon. But that's the only thing I can think of, is that that was a TV aerial and it came through here. So I think my plan on a day when it's not absolutely Arctic is to take that off, replace it with one of those little plastic things that you run solar cables through, and bring the solar in to the cabinet like that. It can just come down there, down the back wall, down underneath there, and then into the cabinet underneath where the battery charger is and where the solar charge controller can be mounted on the wall here. So far, so straightforward. But another thing I need to get sorted that I think is going to have to come through the same hole is a 4G external aerial connection. The Wi-Fi signal here, the cellular signal here in this marina is shockingly bad on multiple networks. I actually added an extra SIM to my phone to see if it would be any better on a different network, and it was worse. I didn't think it could be any worse, but it was. So I want to take the old external aerial I had on Rayland and mount that here and I'll bring that cable in through the same hole, hopefully. But here's where I have a question for you. Here is that aerial, which as you can see has a fair run of this twin cable on it, which ends in these little aerial things that go into the back of the router. And once again, with this cupboard being a kind of electronics cupboard, well, down there is electronics cupboard. If I'm having the solar come through there, I thought what I might do, you can see it there, is pop my little router at the back there. I've got 3 unused 12 volt supplies there, aux 1, 2 and 3. So I can tap a 12 volt off that, convert it to 5 volts, because that thing runs off a 5 volt USB. And that router can just sit in there, and the aerial connection can, guess what, come through that same hole, or a bigger version of it if I need to make it, well, I will need to make it bigger, won't I? But that'll mean the solar and the 4G wire coming through there, 4G going to there. Yes, I haven't got 5G, it's just a 4G router, and then the solar down below, as I just mentioned. Now, here is the dilemma. There's the aerial, which, as you can see, has this mounting plate designed for clamping onto a vertical pole. So you can imagine it could go here, or either on an extendable pole, or a high pole that will then fold down on some sort of pivot. So, okay, putting that on a pole is easy. But now imagine there is a pole. I'll need to mount the pole here somehow, and the obvious place is to also mount it to this very convenient handrail. So how to mount a vertical pole that wants to fold onto a handrail? I have seen some lighting clamps that are a clamp like that, figure of 8 clamp. One goes round that and another goes round something else, but they don't seem to be designed to be constantly put down, put up, put down, put up. I don't think they'd hold in the upright position. It would just fall over at the first hint of a breeze. So I need some sort of clamp that can be locked in an upright position with a pole, but then unlocked and folded down. So it needs to be a figure of 8 clamp, clamping around that side, clamping around a pole that goes vertically, but then can be lowered. And if anyone knows of such a thing, that would be great. And then obviously the wire from that will go into the same hole that I'll make there, and jobs are good in theory. By heck, it's perishingly cold out here. Clearly I'm going to have to make a big enough hole under there. It previously just took a TV aerial wire. It'll now have to take those and the solar cables. And actually, while I think of it, let's just check I've got enough solar cable, because I have got both the wires that came off Twiggy and, for some reason, a length of some other solar cable. I don't know why. Let's see if those will fit the bill. Right, that would be there. I think this is going to work, isn't it? Because there's a little bit of cable here, off the solar panel here. So that'll connect there. It'll come round along here. Right, let's... along here, in there, and that gives me, oh, loads. That will go straight, oh, that's perfect. Wow, isn't that lucky? Good, so I won't need the other one at all. Perfect. The charge controller is going to have to go over here. It can't go too far down, because again, it'll obstruct that. And it can't go too far up in case you ever do want to use that as a hanging rail, which I don't like doing, because I don't like hanging coats in an electronics cupboard where things need ventilation and don't like getting too hot. And if you hang wet coats in here with the electronics, I'm even more reluctant. So anyway, where am I going? The point is, it's going to have to go about there. And the good thing about that is, remember that hole, which must have been where the TV set was, that would hide that hole quite nicely and give me visibility on what the solar's doing. I mean, I'd probably normally have put that up there somewhere out the way, but as there is a ruddy grey ugly hole there, I might as well, multiple holes, I might as well hide some of them by having that there. And although this is the dinette, that is sufficiently high up still that it's not getting in the way of anyone sitting at the dinette. So I think that can go there, and this connects with a little Ethernet cable down to that solar controller, and that can go through that hole and then down. It's almost like it was designed for it, isn't it? So perhaps that answers my question. Because if I use the Victron one, I'll have to just hang a picture there or something to hide the hole. That is the solar and the cellular system DIY projects that I will get to when it is a little less cold outside, and when I have some suggestions for how to mount the solar panel and so on. I've already ordered the little gizmo that takes the 12 volts DC and brings it down to 5 volts, terminating in a little micro USB, and that will power the router. And then I will probably get one of those year-long SIMs that has a pre-allocated amount of data. Again, because I don't come back to the boat often enough, it's not worth paying for a monthly SIM for that. I'll just get one that's a 12-month validity with a packet of data, and then hopefully that will do the job. Now, there are more DIY projects, and there are things inside I shall show you. I think I've just answered my own question on this one, because I want somewhere to hang coats, and this is a very cheap and cheerful little coat hanger. And I was toying with whether to have it here, and yes, it would mean that coats then dangle down behind the back of the person sitting in the dinette, but because you've got this quite thick cushion back here, the coats wouldn't actually stick out that much, and unless they were very wet coats, they wouldn't bother the person sitting at the dinette. And let's face it, I tend only to sit at the dinette for breakfast and supper anyway, so I was thinking that could go there, but if I'm going to have the solar controller screen there, well, that would obviously be ridiculous. There is a hook here, as you can see, that I've got a fleece on, but that, I don't think that was meant for coats. That's something to do with the window, because there's another identical one over that side. I'm sure that's not really meant as a coat hook. So yes, that would have gone there, but now it will dangle over the screen. So the other place I'm thinking of, and do shout at me if you can see any massive problems with that, is I thought it could go there on the passageway as you come in. The only thing being, it will then slightly obstruct the passageway. I'll get a coat and I'll show you how it looks. Here is a coat, here is the hangy thing, and it would kind of go like that. Now that does come out quite a way, but it does give me somewhere to put the coat. I've got one more option on that, which is instead of this thing, to have one of these double ones and put it there, and then again slightly in the way, but it does give me somewhere to put a coat. What do you think? I mentioned this, I think, in my New Year's Day video. I need to replace the the cold water heater, the hot water producer, the immersion heater anyway. It's electric, runs off 240 volts, and I know it doesn't work because when I switch it on, nothing happens, but also the previous owners left this box on the boat which contains, oh what a surprise, a brand new, shiny, never before used immersion heater element. So clearly they knew it wasn't working and had plans to replace it, but never got round to it, so now it's my job. And in theory, this is straightforward. You unscrew the old one from the hot water tank, pull it out, having drained the hot water tank down first, stick this one in, screw it in, and then there's just the normal 3 wires, live, neutral, earth that go into this, and Bob's your uncle. However, if I show you the hot water tank, and you'll see why this is going to be a pig of a job. There under the back deck boards is the hot water cylinder, and you might first of all think that if you're going to put an electric heating element in it, you'd put it in the top so that you could unscrew and replace it without having to actually drain down the whole system. But oh no, that would make life far too easy. So instead, it's a side-mounted one. Well, then you'd think, let's put it round here so that you can just unscrew it without a problem once you've drained down the system. But oh no, that would make it far too easy. So let's instead have it in amongst all the lagging with the back of the boat, as in the actual side of the boat just behind that, so that as you try and pull that out, you're going to be clonking into the side of the boat. What? Why did somebody put this tank in with the element? Sea Otter did a lot of things brilliantly, but this was not one of them, because that's literally the side of the boat. That black circular thing is the heating element. I've got to unscrew that and pull it out in amongst all of those pipes, bearing in mind that behind the red stuff
is the side of the boat, so it'll have to come out at a weird angle and then get the new one in there as well. And then, of course, refill the whole water system. Again, not a job I'm going to do at the moment with it being sub-zero, and not least because all the water at the marine has been turned off because of the frost. So there we go, that's a little delightful project that awaits me for the spring. I'm just running the engine for a few minutes because it hasn't been run for ages and it has been cold and it would probably just like a few minutes of run. But that has reminded me, of course, I need to fix the dodgy connection to the tachometer, which causes the revs to show random amounts if you tap the glass and then you tap it again, it goes back to normal. So I think there's a loose connection somewhere on the back of the device. It's showing correctly at the moment, about 1100 RPM, but it is dodgy, so I must take that out and see if there's anything obvious with that. I might do that today, actually. I'm sure I could. It's only a few screws. I'll wait till I've run the engine, take that out and see if there's anything very obvious at the back that looks loose. Of course, it's not doing it now. Behaving perfectly. But I swear, previously, if you tap the glass, it would alternate between showing the right reading and showing a random reading. No, it's fixed itself. Of course it has. Righty-ho, in the last hour and 20 minutes, I've done an oil and filter change on the engine. I was umming and ahhing about whether to do it today, and I thought, you know what, let's just get it done, conveniently forgetting that I didn't have with me the strappy thing that you use to get the old oil filter off, and my hands were completely numb from the cold and also slippery from pumping out all the old oil, some of which of course got on my hands. So trying to get the old filter off was an absolute pain, and I ended up resorting to the old screwdriver banged into it with a hammer technique, which gives you a bit of leverage to push it round. Even that was actually quite awkward, because although you can get a hand down to the oil filter, trying to get down there with a hammer and a screwdriver, it was not good. Anyway, it's done. I have put a new oil filter on, I have put new oil in, I've run the engine, and it seems happy. But I will, of course, keep an eye on that next time I run it properly for any leaks. There's just been oil everywhere. Forgot to bring anything to mop the old oil up with that inevitably spills when you take the old oil filter off, so it dripped into the bilge, and it's just got... Oh, you wouldn't believe. Well, you probably would believe if you've ever done it. But anyway, there we go. It's been done. And next time I do that, I will arm myself with many soaking mats for soaking stuff up. I'm thinking, with it now being 1 o'clock, it's time for a quick sandwich and a cup of tea. So that's what I'm going to do. And yes, it is a cheese sandwich. Of course it is. There is another outside issue that I will need to address. Not now, it's too cold. But you may recall when I bought the boat, I spotted this giant dent in it that it must have hit something fairly solid, and it looks terrible, but actually it's fillable. I mean, you could do aluminium welding on that, but what I've got is some epoxy with aluminium mixed into it, and it's a sort of paste that hardens, so I just need to grind that out and then put this paste in and then paint over it, and hopefully it'll become invisible. There's what ought to be a fairly trivial thing I want to do with these doors. You see, you can pull that door shut and you can pull that door shut, but unless you also draw the hatch across, there's no way of holding these closed. And if the wind blows, they just rattle, 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 rattle all the time. So I'm thinking some sort of latch down there, which could I'll either have to drill a little hole and the latch will slot straight in. Did you hear that? Them rattling in the wind. The latch could just go straight into there, and if I put it on this one, it'll hold both doors, because that one's got a little flap on it that holds both doors. So a latch that goes straight into there. But if this is some sort of box section aluminium, when the latch is up and the doors are open, if it rains, rain will get in there, and then it'll go round the box section and probably come out somewhere I don't want it. So my other option is to screw on or glue on a bit of wood that's this thick, and then put the latch here so it just drops down the side of the box section here, and I wouldn't actually have to drill into the metal. It wouldn't look terribly pretty though, would it? A big chunk of wood here with a latch on it. But it would sort of... This is the downside of aluminium. It's not magnetic. You can't do clever things with magnets. I did wonder whether I might get some thing I could slot over both sides of this and over the gap, and then it would just hold the doors steady. But I don't know what that would look like. Some sort of clamp. A clamp, but a long clamp. A long flat clamp that goes over here and holds the two together. Although they might still rattle a bit, mightn't they? Maybe the latch is the better idea. There is an issue I want to sort with the water pump. And the way these work is that when you run the water, water gets squeezed through the pipes through a little accumulator, a pressurised accumulator, and when that drops below a certain pressure, the pump kicks in and brings everything back up to pressure again. But mine is clearly set wrong because the water just turns to an absolute dribble. Dribble, 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 dribble. Come on, come on. Then finally, the pump kicks in and you get a bit of strength back. Then the accumulator's pushing it and the accumulator's pushing it. And the accumulator's doing its job, but I want that pressure switch to kick in a bit sooner because look, there's barely anything coming out. Come on. Oh, filling a mug is painful like this. So that pressure switch needs to kick in a bit quicker. The gubbins of all that is under that seat where Mr. Sea Otter is having a little nap. There it is, and thanks to Sea Otter for making it all very, very accessible. So you've got a filter, you've got the pump, and you've got the little accumulator. And somewhere in that lot is a pressure switch that tells the pump when to switch on. But I don't actually know if it's part of the pump. I'm going to guess it probably is part of the pump. In which case, maybe there's an adjustment on the back. If anyone knows how to adjust the trigger point for the low pressure to kick in, I would really like to know. Here's another job that's going to have to be done at some point, recovering all the cushions. They mostly look superficially fine, apart from very obvious bits like this where there's a split. But actually, if you get up close, you can see they've got lots of little splits in them. So these all need recovering. I was at a campervan event several months ago where I met a woman who not only does cushion recovering, but also does classes where you can learn how to do it yourself. And given that I've had 2 boats and a campervan, learning how to redo cushion covers might not be a silly skill to acquire. So I'll have a look into that. Now picture, if you will, it's evening time and it's dark perhaps, the night is drawing in. I'm sitting here on the bench seat with my back up against the end of the kitchen unit and I'm thinking, I fancy watching a movie. It suddenly occurred to me the other day that would make a good little cinema screen, and I could put a speaker behind me and a speaker over there and 2 speakers up there and have quite a good little mini cinema. Have a little projector somewhere on the ceiling up there, just a tiny one, and then the screen there, speakers either side. Bob's your uncle. And there is one other job I need to do back in the cockpit. I did start doing this ages ago and needed to order some bits, and that is replace the control cables that go from the throttle down to the engine and gearbox. The existing cables work, but they are probably the original cables, and I have heard tale of very old cables stretching and snapping. This boat is now 24 years old. I think those cables need replacing. Certainly, you may recall I showed the little brass trunnions, I think they're called, which were wearing through. The brass had just worn away and at some point they're going to snap. So I bought new ones of those, but I've also bought in these giant pizza boxes new control cables, which let me tell you are not cheap, but it's trapped itself on the cardboard. Here we go. You've got, they're quite complicated things for cables, but you've got this end here, and you've got this end here, and one bit actually latches onto the engine. I think it's that end, and then, or the gearbox, and then this bit latches into the throttle control, and then as you pull that, and let me tell you, that moves so smoothly compared to the one that's out there. It's quite stiff, the old throttle control and gearbox, and this, that is smooth as hot knife through butter and all that kind of thing. So at some point I need to put these on. I'm willing to bet
there's going to be some other little bit that screws on here that I haven't got, because the trunnion bit I don't think is going to go directly on that end. Anyway, bit of investigation needed, but that is yet another job. So as you can see, there is quite a lot of DIY to be done aboard the boat. I'm sure there will be other things that occur to me as well. But for the moment, that's my list of projects, which at my usual DIY rate, I reckon will be completed in about 4 or 5 years' time. Anyway, I thought I'd highlight what's coming up. Suggestions, if you have any, for the home cinema system. I know that's not the most important DIY project, or all the other ones, how I'm going to route the cables and all this sort of stuff that I've said. Do pop them in the comments below. I will read every comment. I may or may not respond to every comment. Anyway, I hope you have some good suggestions for me as to how I can achieve my DIY goals. Thank you very much for watching, and cheerio.